Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. I know you are probably all tired. I'm here with Chris and Milos. Why don't you guys give us kind of a 1-minute introduction of yourselves?
Sure. Thanks, Martin. Milos here. I'm a VP of Engineering at Zupul. It's a Madrid-based startup, but we're a global presence. And we just recently, last year, came out of stealth, and the space in which we operate is pretty much aligned with AI, and feeding the AI with trusted data about the physical world.
Awesome. Chris?
Hey everyone, I'm Chris Bach. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I co-founded a company called Netlify. We run close to 100 million sites, stores, apps. So basically, whenever you're using an agent like Anthropic's Claude Code or something like that, wherever you'll end up deploying that piece of software or website or whatever it might be is typically with us. And I also co-founded a company called PTL, which is an AI research lab that does super forecasting, and Talent Star, which is not, I live in San Francisco, but this is not a very San Francisco play, which is a digital platform for soccer, all soccer players, clubs and academies that I'm having a lot of fun with.
Fantastic. So let's get creative here. Chris, once we move from humans interacting with software to agents interacting with agents, the abstractions change completely. What does the world look like?
There's so many layers to that, right? I think when it comes to agents, I think this way, the first way of AI, especially when it comes to creating software and so on, was really focused on automating manual tasks, right? So you could connect to an API, for example, and you can do some stuff as a developer, and now AI could do it for you. And I think the next step is AI being able to create new standards, right? Any programming language ever known, ever made by mankind is made to be maintained and used and documented by people. But agents will necessarily have a very different way of consuming material and creating outputs. And so I think that we'll start seeing now, and it'll only become more and more, new standards emerge, where it's not just automating what's there, but actually creating something that wasn't there in the beginning, and then opening new use cases with it. And I also think there's other parts of the evolution. What I said on the forecasting side has very much to do with LLMs. The first generation of AI was very good at discussing what's there, not so much about what's not there yet. So if it has to guess at how long will a government shutdown take, it'll look at, well, all the others took 2 weeks, so this will probably take 2 weeks as well, rather than look at what's changed and how would this pan out perhaps differently. And so yeah, I sit in the middle of that transference as well, where the LLMs are becoming better and better at understanding temporal change or change over time, and means also much better at looking forward. So all of these things are going to have huge impact, right? And I'm sure we'll get to that later as we discussed prior, but there's also how we consume these things as digital natives. But
Awesome. Milos, a lot of the AI conversation focuses on digital workflows. You guys are at the core of this. You're working on digital twins and physical assets. So what changes when AI starts making decisions about real-world systems rather than just software systems by itself, as we're doing it now?
Yeah, well, I would probably steer away from the word like real world. I would, digital world is still real world, but physical world and digital world, like two sides of a, unified coin. So I think Christian mentioned a little bit around, all of this focus has so far been quite a bit on the digital world, right? And this is where we believe, and I think there is also a consensus forming that we want to now infuse a lot of this physical world data, operations data, sensory data, Earth observation data, things about the world. Digital world came from the real world. It was an abstraction that helped us model the real world. We also want to now infuse it with the real data and make it more robust. So, when you see what agents can do now, think when you give them trustable, verifiable data about the real world, about assets at risk. And when I say assets at risk, like flooding regions, erosion regions, critical infrastructure. Think about communities in, let's say, somewhere like in Alaska. If the road gets cut, they are completely shut down mode. We can help them prevent some of those things, and I think that is one of the angles that brings a lot of societal value as well.
Also, just to add to that, there's this notion of self-fulfilling prophecies that's interesting, right? So, for example, at PTL, we'll do complete automated, so AI hedge fund, right, based on the model, all the automated trading. Now, when they perform better, that will be more of that, right? And so, what, in essence, right? So the world economy is governed by the market caps of all these different companies, and basically the Wall Streets of the world. And so if AI is essentially betting on the outcome and being more accurate, it ends up becoming the ones that actually dictates the price and the motions and what categories are in growth and not, right? So without us actually doing it because of that, but just doing it to adopting AI because we want to be better at predicting the future, we're also creating the future that way, right? So I think like that's also something where there'll have to be checks and balances and some regulation as well to keep that.
Talking about checks and balances, this morning we started discussing about AI manipulating us in the near future, and tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, yeah, so I mean, like, one thing is I said, obviously, a lot with the web, and I think the way that that's evolving is that now we have these abilities for web developers. My target audience in Netlify was at the end maybe 70 million developers, and now, well, we're talking 3 billion, because anyone can prompt the site, right? You don't even need to know what HTML is. You can just go and ask an LLM to do it for you. And I think the web and digital experiences are going to a place where they make a fundamental shift in going from being static to becoming conversational, right? And so every digital experience is less about visiting a website, and it's more about the notion of having a conversation with someone, right? And I think that means, in essence, hyper-personalization. But I think in that, the way it's consumed is also going to change. I think that we're going to have a mix of three things, really, right? The digital avatar we were all promised with Web3, which is this notion of like having your own digital profile. The assists of the ChatGPTs of the world, which is your virtual assistant that does all these things for you. And then even like you see these companion apps, right? Your friend, your therapist, your coach, whatever it might be. And obviously AI is also very quickly evolving in that way of becoming someone that you depend on and personify and so on, right? And I think they all merge together, and it becomes a user agent that we consume anything digital with. At the same time, digital channels explode, right? So in a near future, we'll all be wearing glasses that has some sort of augmented reality, right? Or digital contact lenses and so on. And so I think there's a challenge for democracy. Look at what social media did, right? And that's a pretty contained use case, right? But it silos you in the preferential algorithms, whether it's more or less intentional, sort of fortifies a silo, and you believe that's how the world is, even though, there might be proof to the contrary. And I think that's from social media. But a super intelligent layer that acts as a gateway for everything you see is going to be hugely influential, but also very subtle in its manipulation. You ask for a ticket to Greece, and it'll never suggest Turkish Airlines, and you're not even thinking about that, right? Or just the way it loads conversations, colorful language. These tiny nuances can, at scale, make a population lean one way or another, right? And I think there's some very big challenges on that, and I hope that open source and other things will be part of the answer for it. But yes, and when we talk about building a new digital stack, I think that learning that way, if you're sitting on a corporate side and saying, what do I do with this, is understanding that one thing is that you change your own processes, but you also have to be aware that how anything you represent to a digital audience is going to be consumed in a very different way as well.
So, Milos.
And if I can also chip in here, like I think one of the things that is becoming very apparent as well in this layer is that retrieval is not the end game, it's just the beginning. It's like the first step, and I would even say a baby step. And we need to now think about also the knowledge representation, both on the classical term of knowledge, like maybe ontological or knowledge design, where we say this is what this concept means, but also on the human values, which will help us then have self-regulating systems. Because the only thing that's actually effectively going to regulate an agent is another agent, simply because of the speed of interaction and the amount of knowledge that it can comprehend within that time window, which is very short, but very, very large amount of knowledge. So you actually need to then embed the societal values, human values, and it's really not crazy to think that you're going to have one representation of knowledge and your values that's slightly different than mine. It goes back into that hyper-personalization, and pretty much everybody here will have slightly different values when fully materialized, with shared human values of do not steal and similar things, but with personalization attached to any one of those values.
You touched on a very interesting point. In our company, we call that knowledge assertion, where we imply the values from the person or organization. We are B2B, so technically the organization. We got a core ontology for all those that don't know what an ontology is. It's the taxonomy of your industry, where we can give the LLM the dictionary to understand what you're talking about or what the other end is talking about. If the corpora of knowledge is just way too broad and you're speaking about a nuclear reactor, there are sort of things that, or a lot of things that they won't understand. So we are focusing on building that knowledge so LLMs can respond better, those that are general, right? So the next question is, if agents become collaborators, are companies still organized correctly? Or are we trying to fit kind of a new intelligence layer as we're speaking into structures that were actually designed for humans?
Well, I don't know. I can start maybe from engineering, because I'm an engineering leader, and I can talk about that organization. I think it changes the frequency. It changes the frequency of your ability to act and ability to generate value. And I think we were talking about velocity last year. I think this year we should start talking about hypervelocity. There was talk from Spotify recently, I think last week, when they were talking about having 4,500 deployments every day. Traditionally organized engineering divisions or departments are not ready for that. So you really need to think about how do you not stifle that growth and that creative expression even by putting policies that are designed for humans. These are, even though when you chat with them they sound like human, they're not humans. They operate in a different plane with a different frequency. So you need to design policies for them, not against them. And I think it's key how you frame. These are nuanced differences, but they're really key there. If you properly capture your intent, which is to empower these systems to bring value versus to control them, you can really extract way more. And I think it applies across other divisions, but I just don't want to sound too opinionated about HR, which I don't have expertise in. But
absolutely, I think agents do interact differently. So at Netlify, it's a 10-year-old company, and it was a developer platform. It still is. But then we saw these agents come along. And when we started, it was about a new architecture for the web. So there was essentially us in the space, and then everything had to come with it. We changed from doing monolith renders for every visitor to distributing that. It's a whole technical story, but the reality is that we saw it again with agents, right? So a few years ago, you could just do a simple blog. It couldn't really be used for anything else, but it was obvious that we were going to go through the same journey, and everything was going to be made by agents in a few years. And so we really sat down and saying, well, those agents, how do they consume everything else? How do they integrate into the existing enterprises and everything from authentication, but for everything, from your design brand guides to everything else, right? And it became very obvious that we had talked about UX, user experience, DX, developer experience, and we now needed to start talking about agent experience. And Netlify as a company has just been catering that ever since, right? So I think there are definitely, agentic usage does change a lot of things and how things are consumed on the technical side. I think from a personnel side, it changes as well, right? I think the reality is that even though we say unprecedented a lot when there's a new technological change, the internet was unprecedented as well. If you look at from 94 to 99, everyone came online. It was a brand new world, right? These things have happened before, but every time in history throughout IT, and talking since the 1940s, with no exception whatsoever, these abstractions always create more. 25 years ago, 35% of all developers knew machine code. Now it's 0.1%, but there's not less developers, right? And you might say a marketing department won't be abstracted away. Yes, but a marketing department with 10 to 15 people, they might have made 10 to 15 digital executions a year. They're going to be made hundreds of thousands. LLMs are going to be making these digital experiences real time for every single user. And that creates so many new use cases and so much new work that yes, you'll be reschooled. If you just sit in your chair and you don't move, you'll be flooded, and you'll be flooded quickly. But there's a huge opportunity of moving. And so I think fluidity and change readiness is going to be what's really important. But this notion that AI will do it all for us and we can just go home, I don't buy it, you know? I just feel like the puck is shifting and you have to keep your eye on that and try to look around corners. You can't just say, well, I'm really good at jQuery, or I'm really good at using this piece of software, or I'm really good at this, and then that's it, and I stick to my guns, right? But I really believe that AI used in the right way will help organizations and the people in them.
So given that we're speaking about autonomy and organizations kind of rethinking everything entirely, in a sense, I come from, my background is in cybersecurity. I spent 20 years hacking into anything and everything you might imagine. So right now, Elastic published a paper that they saw an agent do an attack in a system in 27 seconds. That's for a human. It's completely impossible to respond. But at the same time, now we're giving agents autonomy to do whatever they want at the end of the day, because there's no enforcement layer for the agentic era. At least there are a few companies coming up. But there's another paper that said that 5% of the tools that the agents are calling, it's malware. The rest, it's probably credential stealers. So how do you see companies preparing for this from your perspective of building kind of agentic systems that are starting to act autonomously and adapt to new things as they keep coming by, right?
Well, I would maybe tie it back to the previous topic as well, because we talked a lot about what's the role of the agentic and how we are evolving organization to fit agentic. We also need to not forget the human, and I think we were already kind of agreeing on that, but I think there is a new role emerging as well. If you think about now how the product engineering and building things works, you have a product manager, you have engineers, and then you might have also like a project manager who kind of orchestrates multiple product lines into a big cohesive vision. Now I think because you have these agents that can assume personas and can augment you on the skills that you don't have, we kind of emergence of this role called builder, I would call, and then they're all building things. And this is where I think that human element that's becoming very critical is in some elements taste, and what I mean by that, or judgment. You need to draw from your experiences to understand how to make the right calls and how to govern this. So the human in the loop will, I fully agree with Christian's perspective. There will be more. There will be more opportunities for human in the loop, but the right human in the right loop.
I also like an example. Talent Star is a platform for football players. And football is soccer. It's a huge sport, right? The biggest in the world. It's hyper commercialized, but it's only commercialized for a very thin sliver of professionals. The 99.9% are players that are not in clubs or fancy academies, and they're pretty invisible. They've been pretty uncatered so far. And so Talent Star is a platform that takes recruiting software where you film yourself and you present it to clubs. It takes academy software. It takes AI personalized coaching and a bunch of other stuff and pulls it into one platform. And the notion here is that if you look at, for example, the coach, right? So the coach now has AI coaching and personalization from all these different angles. We use AI, a lot of vision recognition on gait analysis and all these things. And honestly, a lot of this is something the coach couldn't do before, right? And measure shot velocity and all these other things, and pull on millions of hours of content and publish data on what are the exercises to improve your top velocity and all these things. But the reality is that the coach before would just be a babysitter. There's 30 kids. There's no way of doing individualized training. Everyone runs around the same track. Everyone does the same thing Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Everyone do the same stretches. And now it's because of this as a catalyst, they're able to do so much more. But it doesn't replace the coach. The scout's the same, right? It doesn't matter if you're Real Madrid or Manchester United. You're not tracking 50 million players. But if you have data on those 50 million players, you can start looking for patterns and so on, right? And these scouts are not being replaced because no one is telling them what the talent that they specifically need should look like. But they just get a lot more assisted, right? Which helps the clubs and helps the individual players. And so I think, and that will continue to be the case, right? So I think in most cases, AI ends up by being a fantastic extension, opening new use cases, right? And yes, you can say a function might be replaced, but not the person, because the person just moves to be somewhere else in the value chain.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what the new infrastructure is enabling, right? So for the Marvel fans here or Iron Man fans here, are we closer to the Jarvis moment? And who are the builders of the infrastructure required to get there?
Well, I think we are kind of already transitioning somewhere between Jarvis and the vision. So I think for me, the physical world, again, digital Jarvis, physical vision when they get the body. I think physical it also ties to the talent star as well, because a lot of that is about real actors in real world, data about the
Yep.
real people.
Yep.
What we do, for instance, is data about real objects, real assets at risk, your farm fields, your bridges, your roads, your coastline, real lives at stake, careers at stake. But it is about that. It's about unlocking the value at the frequency and at the scale that wasn't being unlocked before. Maybe the same flavor of the value, but at an unprecedented scale, which then creates new opportunities and yeah.
I think the Jarvis moment is pretty close, right? I think, for me, superintelligence, the next steps of AI, is really about the ability to simulate outcomes. It's about decision making. So it's about knowing what's going to happen next and what should I do about it, right? And we're getting closer and closer to doing that. And then I think we all saw that dancing robot outside. I'm pretty impressed that this bipedal thing has that
I was
good
gonna
balance,
get there.
right? I mean, so I think okay, local LLMs and stuff like that has some weight to it, but we're all using Waymos, at least, well, not all of us, but it's Waymos are here, right? In San Francisco, and a few other places. But I think the autonomy is getting closer and closer, and so right now these things are intersecting in different models, but it doesn't take a much stretch of the imagination to pull them all into a robot, and there you go. Mr.
Yeah,
Jarvis.
I don't know if you guys have seen, there are videos online of people actually getting Claude to interact with physical elements and just pretty much putting on a car with a battery powered, putting a camera on top and Claude analyzing all the feedback that they're getting from the camera. So people are getting really creative. So we are kind of 6 minutes away, so I want you to challenge everyone here. Who do you think are the builders, or what's a key takeaway from all the people here on what to build, right? If we are talking about the infrastructure, if we are talking about autonomy, if we are talking about superintelligence, what's kind of a challenge that you can present to people to think about the future architecture that we'll need, that all companies in the world will need to adapt? And also, I wouldn't be in this space if I didn't ask you, what's the implication of new computing power such as quantum in all of this?
Well, I would add another question before answering. It's like also, I think art is also knowing what not to build because somebody else is building. There are things you don't want to build because you don't want to build, because it's a distraction from the things you want to build. So the fact that we have these now pervasive tools and they are so empowering and they're short the cycle, and the resource and the risk that you need to put up front to test an idea is so much lower. It's actually a trap on its own, because you can try too many things and get distracted in the mud. So I think focus is a very important thing to learn as a new builder, and I think passion is the other one. So if you don't have focus and you don't have passion, it doesn't matter what you're building. So it becomes, in a way, closer to a Renaissance painter than anything else that I've seen, and I think it's very important to find that spark. So decouple from what you don't want to build, what you don't want to be known from your purpose. And I would start there.
I always say, and that's really good advice, I always say, right now we are flooded with information. Work from first principles backwards. Chris?
Yeah, I think, I often get asked about sort of what does defensibility look like if you start something and the category might be abstracted away really quickly. But then your iteration speed is just as fast. Right? So, it's sort of level set, and it's back to basics, right? Yes, you can build something, and it is true, right now, there is a chance that whatever you're doing is going to be abstracted away faster than otherwise because of the, leapfrogging in AI, but it doesn't take you 6 months to do a prototype. It takes you like a weekend, to build really complicated pieces of software, whatever it might be, And so I think that's one thing, is don't get too scared, just move fast. and I think the other notion is I think you covered it pretty well, right? But AI often, when you're asked about it, is a very logical approach, right? And so I find most founders, they have a bit of a contested viewpoint, right? They'll go somewhere where others haven't for a reason, right? And then they have a good understanding of why now and what changed, and they have some unique insights and grit, and being relentlessly resourceful, and you go and you make it happen anyway, right? And so I think like SpaceX, with the challenges of being successful at that scale, had he had Grok and Ask back then, he probably would have said, don't do that, right? Like, that's not a good idea. and so I do think that founders and builders particularly also have a different mindset that's going to be a little harder to copy, and anything that is hard to copy is what you really want to make your forte and your strength and your differentiator. So lean into that founder's intuition.
Yeah. So we challenge you all to not be scared. I mean, we were speaking with Milos a few moments ago, where he was telling us, hey, I'm not a founder yet, but maybe in the future, right? So for all those who are scared to jump into the pool and go full speed ahead, today you got all the tools at literally your fingertips. So go ahead and start. Do it over the weekend. We were just discussing.
I'll be your first angel check. Just ping me.
Sounds good. But
there we go. Look at this.
there is an important point there to add. Like, one key element is to get your product market fit, to learn from your customer. Embrace your customer. Don't forget that. So if you can get the prototype over the weekend, then be courageous, the other word. So be courageous, go and test it, fail. I mean, Edison said, for every one thing that I did, I failed 1,000 times. Failed 1,000 times. Now it's the right time to fail 1,000 times. It takes way less time than it did in the past.
And then, I mean, of course, there's also nuances here that we could keep going into, but one of them, for example, I do feel is that the equation of build versus buy is changing. That's always been a thing for any founder ever, right? Is like, if I'm solving something, what can I charge for it? Are they going to build it themselves or versus buy it from me? What's the overhead in both scenarios? And now it's becoming easier and easier to build, and I think that's going to be a discipline where more and more companies are aware that a lot of the software they used to subscribe to, they will build themselves. But that doesn't mean that you can't find relevance, right? But it is something you should keep in mind. If it has a very small footprint, it might be something that's hard to keep defensible at length. And if it is venture-backed, at length does mean something, right? Because you're trying to come up with an outsized return. So it needs to be able to scale, right? But again, that's one of 1,000 nuances here. The base notion is trust your intuition and move fast.
So given that we discussed kind of where we're at, where we're going, we challenge you all to build the infrastructure of the future, because even as you think that we are not ready yet, or you might be scared, we need it. And if you don't do it, someone else will do it. So just jump into the pool, do it, and you'll have fun, and you'll learn a lot. For sure, as we said, fail 1,000 times, go for it, and have fun. That's all about it. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, guys. Fantastic panel.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.